The camera was found on October 14th, 2021. It was lodged in the crook of a pine tree on the eastern ridge of the Caraway Trail. No strap, no case, just sitting there. The hiker who found it noticed the battery was still at 11%. She checked the memory card. There were 214 photos and one video, 38 minutes long. The man who owned the camera had been found 3 days earlier, 3 miles away, at the base of a ravine. The coroner ruled it a fall, but no one could explain why his camera was in a tree or what was in the video. Welcome back to Dark Frequency. This is case number 2. I want to be clear before we go further. What you're about to hear has no clean resolution. There are facts, there are gaps, and there is footage that, to this day, has never been explained to the satisfaction of everyone who has seen it. We're going to go through it carefully, frame by frame, where necessary, because the details matter. Marcus Hale was 34 years old. He was an experienced hiker, not a casual weekend type. He had completed multi-day solo treks in 3 different mountain ranges. He was the kind of person who checked weather reports 3 days in advance and always filed a trail plan before going out. On October 11th, he filed exactly that. Caraway Trail, Eastern Loop, single night, back by noon on the 12th. He had his gear in order, 40-liter pack, water filtration system, emergency beacon. His camera, a mid-range mirrorless he'd had for 2 years, went with him everywhere. The trailhead camera caught him entering at 8:47 a.m. He was alone. He looked calm. He waved at the camera, something hikers sometimes do, a kind of private joke with surveillance. Nobody saw him after that. When he didn't return by 3 p.m. on the 12th, his emergency contact called the ranger station. Search and rescue deployed. They found him at 6:40 a.m. on October 13th. He was at the base of a ravine approximately 2.3 miles north of the main trail, off route, in terrain he had no reason to be in. The official cause of death was blunt force trauma, consistent with a fall from height. He was carrying his pack, his beacon, which he never activated, his phone, his food, everything except his camera. When the camera was found the following day, 3 miles from his body, lodged in a pine tree, search and rescue assumed it had somehow been separated during the fall, thrown clear. But here is the problem with that theory. The ravine where Marcus died faces south. The tree where the camera was found sits on a northern ridge. Between them, a 400-foot elevation change and a ridgeline. You cannot throw or drop something from the ravine to that tree. The physics don't work. The camera had to have been placed there, or carried there. The second anomaly was the battery. When the camera was recovered, it had 11% battery life remaining. A mirrorless camera in standby loses approximately 2 to 3% battery per day. If Marcus had the camera with him when he entered the trail, and the camera was found 4 days after he went missing, there should have been less than 1% battery left. 11% suggests the camera had been turned off, not left in standby, turned off and left there. Recently, someone had handled that camera after Marcus died. Security cameras were supposed to give us answers. They record everything, every movement, every shadow, every moment that passes through a space. The footage doesn't lie. It doesn't misremember. It doesn't exaggerate. But sometimes, the footage raises more questions than it answers. What you're about to hear are 3 documented cases where security camera recordings captured something that investigators, security experts, and in some cases law enforcement could not explain. All 3 incidents are real. The footage from each case exists. Some of you will find rational explanations for what happened. Others won't. Let's begin. The first case comes from a mid-sized hotel in Eastern Europe. The year was 2019. The hotel had recently updated its security system. New cameras, better resolution, motion-triggered recording on every floor. On the night of March 14th, the motion sensor on the 4th floor activated at 3:17 in the morning. The camera recorded exactly 42 seconds of footage before going offline. In those 42 seconds, the hallway appears empty, the corridor lights are on, nothing moves, except for one thing. At the 11-second mark, the shadow of a person appears on the left wall of the corridor, moving slowly from room 412 toward the elevator. The shadow is clear, well-defined, and cast at an angle consistent with someone walking under the ceiling lights. There is no person casting it. The hotel's security team reviewed the footage immediately. They checked every angle. They reviewed footage from the floor above and the floor below. No guests had left their rooms. No staff were on that floor. The camera covering the other end of the hallway showed nothing. No person, no movement. Only the shadow, moving steadily and then gone. The hotel's management chose not to release the footage publicly. It was only obtained by a security researcher who had worked with the property 2 years later. His assessment quoted in a private document that later circulated online. There is no physical explanation consistent with normal shadow projection that accounts for what appears in this recording. He had no further comment. The second case is perhaps the most studied of the three. In 2021, a warehouse facility in the American Midwest installed a full camera grid across its property. 64 cameras total, covering every square foot of the building's interior. The system was installed after a series of unexplained equipment malfunctions that had cost the company nearly $200,000 in damage. For 3 months, nothing unusual was recorded. Then, on a Tuesday night in October, 9 cameras in the northwest section of the building went dark simultaneously at 11:48 p.m. Not offline, the signal was still transmitting. The cameras were powered, but the feeds showed only static. The static lasted for exactly 4 minutes and 11 seconds. When the feeds restored, a forklift that had been parked in its designated bay, confirmed on footage recorded 1 hour earlier, had moved. It was now positioned in the center of an adjacent storage room facing the door. The key was not in the ignition. The battery had been disconnected as part of standard overnight protocol. The facility's investigation found no signs of entry, no fingerprints on the forklift beyond the regular operators, no explanation for the simultaneous camera outage. A mechanical engineer brought in to assess the situation concluded that the forklift could not have moved under its own power. To move it manually, without the battery, would have required at minimum 2 people and significant physical effort. It would have taken time that the 4-minute window, by all accounts, barely allowed. The warehouse never identified a culprit. The equipment malfunction stopped after that night and never returned.